Want me to start? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tessa Jacob, and I'm a partner in Husch Blackwell's Kansas City office. I'm also co-leader of the Husch Blackwell eDiscovery Solutions Group. Before we begin today, I need to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console, there is a multiple applications of icons for you to use during the day. If you have any questions during the webcast, please submit via the question box. We will try to answer all your questions during the webcast today, but if a fuller answer is needed we run out of time, those questions will be answered later via email. There's also a PDF of the presentation that's available in the program materials folder. This program has been approved for legal education hours. For live attendees, report your hours by clicking on the CEU icon at the bottom of the screen. A certificate of attendance, including course numbers, will be emailed to you tomorrow, along with a recording of the webcast for watching and sharing. Towards the end of the program, be sure to complete our short survey. We use your feedback to plan future events that are applicable to your business needs. That's all for housekeeping items right now. Let's get started with our program. So today is eDiscovery Day. It is a nationwide day started about 8 years ago to celebrate and shine a light on the importance of eDiscovery. We at Husch are having a full day of eDiscovery CLEs for our attorneys. This is our external presentation for clients and friends. When we were looking for an eDiscovery topic that would impact in-house lawyers and clients, Microsoft 365 seemed to be the obvious and most useful topic. About 95% of our clients are on M365. Many of you work with us or with other outside counsel when using eDiscovery features available in M365. However, many of you all use M365 in conjunction with your IT department, or you turn over the process to IT. So today's presentation, we're going to help you ensure that your M365 methodology is defensible. Joining me today is John Collins, who is the Senior Director at Lighthouse. John is one of the country's foremost experts in Microsoft Exchange email systems. He and his team at Lighthouse help companies implement and configure M365, specifically the retention and legal hold features. John and I have worked together for over a dozen years. We currently have done this or similar presentations in numerous settings. He is a wonderful wealth of resource, and together, John on the technology side and me on the legal side, we hope to help you develop a process that is, again, defensible. Here are our learning objectives today. We're going to start off with just kind of making sure everybody understands where the data in Microsoft 365 is stored, because you have to understand where it's stored in order to make sure you're preserving it and collecting it. The second strategy is how to use the legal hold and preservation features. We're going to go step by step on how to do that. We're going to also talk about effective strategies on how and when to search in Microsoft 365. I find it's a valuable tool, but it's different in every case and with every client. So I have done a lot of different ways in using the tool, and I want to share some of that with you. We're going to also go through the differences on the two sets of features for eDiscovery in Office 365. There's eDiscovery Standard and there's eDiscovery Premium. Both work slightly different ways, and there's some features in there that I think are really great, but they're a little tricky. To be honest, it took me a while to learn how to use those properly. Microsoft has a lot of documentation, but frankly, the documentation is really dense, and it's taken a lot of tries. I mean, and John is the one that suggested it. A lot of this I have set up my own inside Husch Blackwell's M365, and I've just tested it to see, wait a minute, is it working the way I think it's working? So we also plan on doing a live demo. John's going to go through how to use Premium. We have also done screen shares and created slides on how to do that. First of all, in case the live demo doesn't work, but also that you'll have it and you'll be able to use that as a resource later. Okay, we're going to get started. One more thing. Before we get started, I want to break a couple of myths on Office 365. These are actually statements that people have said to me about M365. Frankly, a lot of these have been comments that other eDiscovery attorneys had said to me. The first myth is I need to collect and export everything in order to preserve it. I need a preservation copy. Well, that's what's great about M365 and actually Exchange and the enterprise email systems is that you don't need to collect, preserve. you can preserve in place. And that's the beauty of this system. Another thing I've heard a lot is, oh, I'm not going to use it because the indexing is very poorly. And I will say, you know what? You're right. Sometimes it's poor. It used to be worse, but it's getting better. I say something called, it's called technology aversion, and we attorneys have it a lot, right? If something doesn't work exactly like we thought it would, we're done. We're not going to use it again. And my point to that is we can't do that, right? This is a technology that saves our clients money. I'm going to go right to 4 because with outside counsel access, where you don't have to go back and forth with IT, you're saving your client a lot of money. It's easy, it's efficient, it saves money. It also protects our clients' data. You don't want to give me your the CEO's entire email box if it's not necessary. If you're a healthcare client or you have valuable protected information that's not relevant in the case I'm working on, why do you want to take that outside of your system? So Microsoft's M365 with the outside counsel access is perfect for that. The other thing, number 3, that you hear a lot, I've got to take all the email outside of the client's email system, put it into my own tools like a Nuix to process because you've got all these unindexed items. The beauty is now with premium eDiscovery, you can do the non-searchable items, you can OCR them right in there. And then with standard, there's a way to figure out which ones there are. So again, these are all myths that we're hoping to break because the primary reason that we want to use this is that it's a great way to make eDiscovery, especially related to what's in M365, much more efficient. Get us to the next. John's going to walk us through the various repositories of data inside of Microsoft 365. John?
Thanks, Tessa, and great to be doing this again with you, so thank you. So we really think it's important that practitioners look at M365 not as a single application, because it's not. Microsoft 365 has multiple components, and Tessa mentioned one of them, which is Exchange. So there's Exchange Online, which is the traditional email, right, sending and receiving emails. And that's there, and that's very much a major part of Microsoft 365. But there's other applications, there's other workloads, as Microsoft calls them, that attorneys, paralegals, the folks that are responsible for discovery really need to be aware of. So there's OneDrive for Business, which is typically where individual users store their files. It's a replacement for home drives, if your organization is using home drives. There's Microsoft Teams. So that's got a couple of different subcomponents to it. There's chats, there's files, there's standalone SharePoint. A lot of organizations, when they move to Microsoft 365, even though they're using Teams, even though there's OneDrive for individual user files, there's also a lot of SharePoint that's still out there. And then there's something called Microsoft 365 Groups, which serves a couple different purposes in the platform. But the key thing we want to impress upon you today is that while most of the data resides either in Exchange Online or technically resides in SharePoint, there's actually multiple ways that the repositories are presented from a discovery perspective. And we think that it's really important that these ones that Tessa and I have listed here are on your radar, and that you treat them as what we like to think of as tier 1 data sources that you definitely want to make sure that you're addressing in your discovery process. So we're going to talk a little bit about a little bit more granularly because we want to make sure that when we talk about the repositories, that we're making it clear to the practitioners what we mean by Exchange and OneDrive and SharePoint being the main storage location. So when we talk about Exchange Online and the custodian's mailbox, what's stored inside a custodian's mailbox is what you would expect, right? Which is their email. Their email is stored in there, so anything they send and receive, if they have appointments, calendar items, those are stored in their mailbox. But what also is in the custodian's mailbox are any private or group chats in teams that they've been participating in. So if you've got if your organization is using Microsoft Teams for chat, then the private, right, the one-to-one, the group chat are also stored in the custodian's mailbox. There's also voicemail recordings that can be in there. There's meeting summaries. But the two major categories that we want to make sure folks walk away understanding is that there's email in the custodian mailbox and there's private and group chat that's stored in their mailbox. Now, the other thing that's associated with custodians is OneDrive for Business. And so, as I said earlier, that's where custodians typically are storing their files. And so users can store their files into OneDrive just like they do in a home share on their local computer, right? They store it into folders. But the other nuance to this that's really important to understand is that when users are sharing files in chat, so if Tessa and I are having a private chat back and forth and I share a file with Tessa, that file that I shared with Tessa is actually stored in my OneDrive. So it's really important to bear in mind that OneDrive, while users can store documents in there at random and whatever they want to, when users are sharing documents in chat, OneDrive is the repository where those are stored. And then also other things that are in OneDrive would be things like meeting recordings and whiteboards. So there's a lot of artifacts that are stored inside of OneDrive that we want to make sure are on our radar. Now, the other way that we like to frame this for practitioners is that you've got in M365, you've got the different repositories, right? We talked about. Then you've got custodial and non-custodial data. So I just talked about the mailbox and OneDrive, which are the primary custodial data sources. But there's also non-custodial data sources. And the one that's probably the most prominent would be Microsoft Teams when you're collaborating inside of channels, right? So you can create these teams. Within each team, you can have these channels and you can have conversations. You can share documents back and forth. And so each collaboration team gets its own hidden Exchange online mailbox. And that is technically where the conversations are being stored within the channels. Now, what also happens is that when you create a team, a collaboration team, you get a SharePoint site. And so when the business people are collaborating back and forth inside of a channel and sharing documents, those documents are being stored inside of the team's SharePoint site. What also gets stored inside the SharePoint site would be potentially meeting recordings. If it's a channel meeting, there's meeting notes, there's wiki pages, but those would all be associated with this non-custodial data source. And the reason why it's non-custodial is because a collaboration team probably is going to have 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe 100 different members that are contributing and using the content in there. So that's why we call it a non-custodial data source. And then there's standalone SharePoint, as I mentioned before. A lot of companies still have just plain old vanilla SharePoint sites. And then there's Microsoft Groups, which, again, is another type of collaboration tool, which has kind of been deprecated, but may still be present in your organization. So when you think about the universe of ESI, there's the custodial data sources and what we just talked about, which is the non-custodial data sources.
Okay, thanks. Hey, John, before I go on to my section, I think you're freezing up. They said they can hear you, but you're frozen. So I think Andrea wanted you to hit F5 and see if that helps.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to continue. Okay. I'm going to talk at a very high level about the two native eDiscovery tools in M365, and then we'll dive into it a little deeper. So standard eDiscovery used to be called Core. They keep changing the names all the time. It is the basic level eDiscovery tool for the lower level licenses. So with it, you have the ability to put people on hold, right? You can put their email account on hold. You can put all the things that John was talking on hold. You don't have to collect. You don't journal like you used to. From the EDRM reference model, the standard allows you to do identification, preservation, and collection. This is kind of where we stop. So with the identification, there's searching, right? You can search by keywords, by file type, by document range. There's a lot of different ways to search. You can search your email, your OneDrive, your Teams. The only thing with standard is that it's a little bit more, I would say, clunky. You can search people's emails, but if you want to do OneDrive, you need to know the URL. If you want to search Teams, you need to know the URL, or you're preserving all teams that are involved, and you may not want to do that. It does allow you to run searches and then collect and export that data immediately out. It allows you to get posts from Teams chats. It allows you to get anything that was sent by email, and then depending on what kind of format you want. It does have a little bit of preview function, but it's not great, right? With using standard, you only get to see the I think it's 200 documents of the latest hits. So you're not getting to see everything. The other thing that I'm not crazy about the standard is that the stats are limited because the search is being done inside the person's email box. It's only giving you the email hit count. You don't know the attachment count. A lot of times I need to be able to give the client a better estimate on what type of the costs for the review. And if I don't know the attachment count, it's difficult to do. So stats sound great, but it still works and it's pretty fast. Standard eDiscovery works fairly quickly. So again, you're just doing this middle portion of what we call the EDRM. Premium eDiscovery has some more features, and you're getting not only what you get in standard, but you're getting some advanced eDiscovery features. There is a legal hold notification function in there, and John, when we do the live, is going to show you how to put things on hold, how to use that. There's a little bit more data mapping involved. What's nice with Premium is when you add a data source, it'll say, okay, you're adding Tessa to this as a custodian. She has email. She has OneDrive. Do you want to add that? She has Teams, and she's on she has Teams collaborations, and she's on 5 different teams. Which one of those would you like to put on hold? Which is great, because those of you who have worked with me, I always say we don't want to over preserve, right? You want to preserve what's relevant, and so that's what's nice with Premium. You can do that. With Premium, you collect data and you get pre-estimates, and then you do what's called commit, and you commit it to a review set. So it's 2 stages. That has just recently changed. And one thing with Microsoft is they're constantly changing, which can be good and bad, but what it does is with Premium, it's a little different. When you do the collection, it actually takes a copy of what you collected, and Microsoft moves that data to another server. And then it starts processing just like you would think in tools like Nuix. It's expanding, it's looking at embedded documents. You also have the ability to OCR and do text extraction. There's something called modern attachments, which we'll talk about a little later. You have the ability to find those. Premium can do that. There's better statistics. When you do Premium and you go all the way to committing to review, the stats are pretty amazing. I know exactly how many emails and attachments I'm collecting. You can run analytics, and where you can get near dupe analysis, threading analysis. All of that is great because it gives you a better way to do cost estimates. There is a portion of Premium that allows you to do actually review and production. You can tag, you can do redactions, you can generate load files. So for clients that are running their own small productions, you can do it right out of there. And John's going to talk a little bit about licensing and how that impacts what you get to do. John?
Yes, thanks. I don't know if the video is working any better. I tried to what you suggested, but the licensing is important. Okay, cool. So the licensing is important, and whether or not you get the Premium versus the standard eDiscovery is going to depend on your licensing plan. So at the far right-hand side of the slide, we have in the middle where it says base plan types, we say E5 Premium. If your client or your organization has Premium, they're going to, if they have E5, they're going to have Premium eDiscovery, right? So if they're at the other end of the spectrum, which we have with the sort of the no sign, if they have F1 licenses, if they have F3 licenses, if they have E1 licenses, they don't get the eDiscovery tools. If they have E3, they get the standard eDiscovery tools. And there's different markets. So Microsoft markets to small and medium businesses, enterprise plans, government. So the main thing we wanted to impress upon you is that licensing is important. Some organizations will have E5 licensing, which means they own premium. Others will have E3, which means they own standard. But that last row there, plan add-ons, you can buy just the eDiscovery premium if you have a lower license plan. Like if you have an E1, you can buy an eDiscovery and audit and add that on. So there's lots of different ways for organizations to get to the right licensing level that makes sense for them. But we just wanted to make sure that that you all are aware that licensing is a factor in terms of using the tools.
And John, you can, if you need to upgrade your license, you don't have to do it for the whole organization. You can do it for the people that are involved in your case, right? Your custodians. Like you can decide who's getting the higher level license.
Yes, that's right. And we see that pretty frequently where organizations might have a segment of knowledge workers that have the higher license, or it might be like Tessa said, where they'll license it for a particular matter.
Yeah, more and more, I'm especially because I like what you can do with premium. I really encourage clients to go ahead and pay that extra amount, because when you look at it for your whole litigation budget, it's not that much more to get a higher level license. Okay.
Yep. And so, yeah, I think this just really, Tessa just really touches on a couple of things we said, which is you can upgrade the licensing on an as-needed basis. There are some rules around it. So we recommend that you work with your Microsoft account team, or you work with your in-house IT team who can work with your Microsoft account team to make sure that you're meeting all the licensing requirements. And as we one of the main things to keep in mind is that it's the custodians, it's the users who need the license, not the person that's running the searches and using the tool. So if you've got one person that's using the premium eDiscovery and you've got 1,000 people that you're looking to preserve and collect and do the things Tessa talked about, you need 1,000 licenses, not one. And then there is a way for your outside counsel to have access, and Tessa is one of the leaders in the country at doing this, of allowing your outside counsel to come in and strategically use M365 to reduce costs, reduce risk, reduce the amount of data that you're pulling out. It does require working with your IT to set up the right permissions and the right model, and make sure that IT and your information security teams are comfortable with what you're doing. But we see a lot of organizations that have gone down this path and are using this. And as the last bullet point there, you don't need to buy your outside counsel license. They don't need a license at all.
I guess the only thing I would say with that, because I've had some issues when I've asked clients to set this up, is that you need to, making me a guest doesn't work in your tenant. You actually need to give me a client email address. It could be non-licensed, and then you create a case, and then you give me eDiscovery manager rights, and then I can do what we need to do. So a lot of times they'll say, just use your Husch Blackwell account. And when I do that, I go to my client, our own security and compliance area. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Okay, so before we get to the actual how to use the tool, I want to go through a little bit of what I look at strategy-wise. Like why does Microsoft 365, why is it helpful when I hear, oh, our client has M365? The first one is stats, right? It's a great way to get stats quickly. A lot of times when we start in the case and it's early case assessment, we're getting ready for our first Rule 26 meeting, we need to have an idea of what we're dealing with. We've kind of decided custodians, but I can get in very quickly and I can know how much volume is there. I can run some quick searches. So early case assessment, craft terms, and before our first meeting, have an idea of what we're looking at. Obviously, I could have IT do that. IT can give me stats on how many custodians we have, but this is quicker for me, and it also saves your IT department time. Most of the IT department people I deal with, they don't want to spend their time doing this, and so this is a great way to free up your resources and give it directly to your outside counsel. There are different ways to use Microsoft 365, and I've kind of listed what I think about when I'm deciding, hey, do I want to do the searches all in Microsoft 365 and pull out data, or do I want to do something else differently? And each case is a little different. For some cases, I decide that I am going to export all of the data in the correct date range I had, especially for email. And it depends. It could be a small case. I don't have that much volume, and it's not too costly to look at the volume and decide I'm going to pull it all out. And part of the reason that I can do that is Microsoft is great, but the tool that we use, which is Nuix for processing and searching, it's a lot faster, right? So if it's not that big of a volume, I'm better off, I'll pull it all out. Other cases, I have really complex search terms. It's not just, you know, an and or an or, it's very complex. And Microsoft system isn't great for doing real complex case search terms. The other one could be the number of search terms. I've got some cases we've run over 800 search terms. You don't want me to do that in M365. It's way too slow. You don't have automatic documentation that I need. And then I don't want to run 800 terms myself. I want my case managers to do it. I want us to do it in a tool that's meant for that. So those are kind of ways that I think about it. Maybe I'm just going to pull all the data out. But in some cases, I may decide, you know what, I'm going to break up the custodians into tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1, I want their complete mailboxes. I need to have a more robust searching tool. So I'll pull those out. But then I've got a whole bunch of custodians that I would say tier 2. I just want to test terms against them, and I'll do it right in M365. So that's another option. A third way of doing it is I'll pull one custodian out, and I'm going to use that person. It would be maybe my key custodian to test terms in a different tool, test them well and quicker, and then I'll come back into 365 once I've perfected the terms, and I'll run the terms in there and I'll pull the data out. And then the final way is search everything inside Microsoft 365 and export only the hits. And I will say more and more I'm starting to use D. Kind of as standard cases, I've got, I don't know, anywhere from 6 to a dozen custodians. I've got too much data to pull out. Again, I've got a case right now where with 12, I think 13 custodians, it's 3 million emails. I can't pull all those out. It's going to cost the client too much. I don't want to pull all it out because most of it is not relevant. And the second thing is I want to protect the client's data and keep as much as I can at the clients and only pull out what I need. So that's kind of the way I handle email when I'm thinking about strategy. How do I want to use this? OneDrive is similar, but there's a little bit of difference too. A lot of times with OneDrive, I do export most of it because there's not the volume. There's usually not as much there. And then when I'm talking about using standard, because the data is not processed, the date create and date modified searches don't work correctly for OneDrive because OneDrive thinks the date the document was created is a date somebody loads it into OneDrive. And so unless I take the documents out and actually process it, I won't know the actual date created and modified if that's important, or I do a combination of them. And then finally for Teams chats and collaboration teams, I have to do the searches in Microsoft 365. So strategies wise, like thinking about it, but like usually I will have the client create logins for me and one person in my technology department who will actually take the time to do the exports. I use a combination of standard and premium, primarily because premium, because of the two-step collection stages, it takes a while. Standard is fast. So sometimes I'm running it in both to kind of figure out what do I need. So I'm going to go through standard first. And we've got slides here, and we're just going to walk through it very slowly, and then we'll talk about some premium features, and then John will do the live demo, and then we can go and like I said, we've got some reference materials at the end of this deck, which will be available for you as soon as this program is over. So standard eDiscovery, the first thing that you do is you create a case. Next, you can create searches. Each individual search, it's nice. It tells you be careful when you name it. You don't get to change your name once you do it. The description you can do that. When you do the searches, name, description of what you're searching. Next step is right here. You want to choose your users. You can add as many mailboxes as you want. This is the one that I said is a little different from premium. You have to know the URL for a custodian's OneDrive as a source, and whether they have a Teams, you need to know the actual URL or it doesn't work. You have the opportunity to add key terms. You can also do all of these search parameters. One thing to keep in mind for key terms is it's not really very forgiving. If you use a KQL editor, it will change the format for you, one thing that I get a lot of call from clients is the proximity searches is not like in relativity. It's not within backslash number. If you want to do a proximity search, you spell out near in all caps, do a parens, do the number, and then end of parens. And so that's the one main difference that I do see. But otherwise, you can add as many conditions as you want. You get a nice data summary. On this one, one thing that you notice is that you'll get a number for the hit results. Again, this is going to be just, especially for you, it's the container. Microsoft thinks of as an email, one email is your container. And at this point, because the data is not processed, you don't get attachments. So this can be really, it can fool you when you're using standard. Again, yesterday I did a search and I was amazed. I would hit 1,000 documents and we're talking 30,000 attachments. So if I hadn't known that, I would have given a very bad estimate in cost and time on review. The one thing with searching by standard is you don't have the ability to OCR, right? So you have lots of attachments, especially to email, that weren't indexed. Usually those are PDFs. Those PDFs that people do with their copiers, most clients don't have that set to be searchable. So what's really nice is it points that out. It tells you right here, there were 11,265 items in this search that were not indexed, and it gives you the ability to pull that out. At this point, you can review a sample by hitting this button. Again, the sample is not complete. It's just the very last, most recent 200 documents that it hit. It gives you some different search statistics. Right here, the content, what the size estimate is correct, how many locations it hit, whether it's Exchange or something else. This one is, I sometimes find helpful. You can tell who's by custodian, who's having the most hits down to the least. And you can kind of decide, well, wait a minute, is it the person that I really thought was important? Are they getting the most hits? So you can use this stuff to kind of analyze that. Exporting is pretty uncomplicated and is easy. You get the choice here when you're exporting. Do you want all items and do you want to exclude the ones that were not indexed? The second choice is include the hits and the unindexed items. And then the third choice is just give me the unindexed. So what I would tell you is generally I recommend that you do need to export the non-indexable items and you need to then put them in your search tool, and we put them in NuX and we OCR them. There are some cases that I'm not doing it where the unindexed items is huge, but we negotiate that and we disclose it. I've had a couple things with the government recently where we knew what we were looking for was really an email communication. Why do I need to export anything? So what the unindexed is any email family that has an unindexed items that didn't get hit by a search term. And that's what it's pulling out. Why do I need to do that if I think that most of my items are going to be in email? So in that particular instance, I disclosed it to the DOJ that we have this many items that were unindexed. We are not pulling it out, but it's preserved. So I would say you need to negotiate that because the standard practice for ESI is that you do OCR non-searchable items, and a lot of clients have a ton of that stuff, so you need to disclose that. One thing to know is that if you're doing this, if your custodians say the same and your time frame stays the same, every time you go back into standard with different search terms, you don't need to export the unindexed items every single time. You just need to do it once. And then finally, on your export, you have a choice. And this is this part of it is similar to the one that John's going to show you. You can export it into separate PSTs for each custodian, which is what we recommend. You can export it into one PST for a quick review if the custodian information is not important, but in most cases it is. And then the final thing it'll ask you is, do you want to enable deduplication on export? And our recommendation, and John and I have talked through this a couple of times, the recommendation is not to do it because the deduplication that Microsoft runs is not the standard deduplication that is required in most cases. It's not using a hash value, so the deduplication isn't great. So that's standard. And like I said, it's pretty simple to use. I just trained somebody on how to use it the other day. And the one thing I say is you really can't break it. Sometimes it may break because it seems like it's not working correctly, but keep trying on that. But it's an easy one to use. Next, what we want to go through is there's some additional features in premium that you need to understand how it works, because otherwise your collection isn't defensible. And these features, it took us a while to figure this out. John and I have had many calls about, wait a minute, when is OCR working? How do you do modern attachments? How do you do this? So before we dive into using Premium and John does the live demo, I want to go through what I personally think are some features in Premium that are really great, but that I wasn't clear on how to use them till recently, and I want to make sure that you all understand. So keep in mind, when we went through Standard does the searching right inside the person's email box, right? You can do date filtering or search terms, and then it gives you a chance to export it. Very similar to what you were doing with Exchange on-prem. With Premium, it's 2 steps. You are doing a collection. You can apply date ranges, you can apply search terms, you can do all that stuff. It'll give you a pre-collection estimate, and then you have the chance to do what's called commit, and you commit it to a review set. But what I didn't realize when I first started doing this is until you commit, certain things can't happen. So if you're running search terms at the front end of the collection, you're going to have some issues, and you need to understand what they are. You can work through them, but you need to understand what they are. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, the wrong way, is OCRing, right? This is taking your non-searchable PDFs and making them searchable. There are 2 steps, step 1 and 2. Well, actually, let me back that up. There are 2 sets of documents that you need to make searchable, right? You've got the OneDrive and SharePoint documents. Let's say you have a PDF in the custodian's OneDrive or in SharePoint that wasn't searchable. In order to make that searchable, when you get into Premium and you have all of these choices, there's a settings. You need to press settings, you need to go inside settings, and you need to enable OCR. It's really weird. I don't know why it's not set, but you need to go in and do that. The second thing is as you add data sources, when you add the data source, that's the second thing that happens. So that means now your OneDrive and your SharePoint documents, when you create your first collection, are already being OCR'd. However, and this is what I didn't realize till later, is that the PDFs that are attached to your email, it doesn't mean just because I clicked that setting that it's OCR. The PDFs don't get OCR until the collection is committed to your review set. Microsoft copies that data set, moves it to a different location, and that's when the processing starts. So what you need to understand is you may run a search term in the collection set, but that search term is only going to hit things that have words in it, right? So your PDFs will be missed unless you wait to do your search terms in the review set, and we'll go through some examples. The next thing I wanted to talk about is modern attachments retrieval. Modern attachments is kind of a newfangled word. Modern attachment is basically a link, right? It's when people share links. They could be doing it in Teams, they could be doing it in email. I would say more and more people are starting to share links. In some companies, when you do your initial interviews, you'll find out, wow, they do a lot of it. A lot of their stuff is kept in OneDrive or in SharePoint, and they send links in their emails or in Teams. So a modern attachment is basically a link. The modern attachment, like I said, is not retrieved until you commit the document. So when you commit, you do the collection and say, I want all of Tessa's email and OneDrive documents for the last 10 years, and you commit it to review set, what it's doing is any links that I have, any links that somebody has shared with me, if somebody in my tenant, not John, because he's at a different company, but somebody at Husch Blackwell had shared a document with me that was in their OneDrive, even if they're not a custodian that I'm searching, Microsoft will go in and find those documents and pull it into the shared document. So that's interesting and very helpful for companies that do a lot of that. What is retrieved is kind of interesting, and I'm going to have John step in right now and talk about which version, because we got this at a last presentation we're doing, was a question that which is it getting the right version? So John, is it getting the right version, the one that was actually shared?
So that's a big question, and since this linking has become sort of ubiquitous with Microsoft Teams, the only way you can share files is through a link. And then email, it's becoming more and more predominant. So for the last 5 or 6 years, when you would collect, well, actually, let me rephrase that. For about the last 2 years since premium eDiscovery can do what Tessa described, which is collect the modern attachment, the actual file, by following the link. Up until recently, it would just collect the most recent version of the file. And because M365 has versioning enabled by default, and most companies have autosave enabled in Word and Excel, what that means is that when the business people are working on documents and files that they're sharing, the version that they share today might have 30 edits between today and say 6 months from now. And let's say Tessa is doing a collection 12 months from now, a year from now. So what Microsoft has provided recently is a new feature called the version shared. And so we have a screenshot there, which your IT people need to enable this in your tenant. But if you enable this feature, then what'll happen is every time a document is shared through a link, there's a flag that's put on that version of the document. And then when you go and do your discovery collection later on, even if there's 150 versions of a particular Word document or Excel spreadsheet, in the collection, it will be noted which version is the one that was shared on the date that it was shared, even though there's all these other versions. So that's how you can identify the exact version that was shared on a particular date.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, when John and I talked through this, I don't know what we call it, the version, the shared version feature, this has to be already set. So it doesn't help that all of a sudden you have a case and you put a legal hold on and you're working on collection. Right. You can't just go in then and set this because it had to already be set. So we talked through this, and this is something that I would recommend for most companies, right? That you have this turned on, because ultimately, especially companies that are in litigation a lot, it's not helpful not to have the version that was shared. It could lead to a lot of issues because you're pulling, you can't figure out which version was pulled. At the very back of our slide deck, John did create a slide that shows you how to turn this on, and you might want to share that with your IT department. I have Nichols v. Noom written, highlighted down here. It's a case that was decided last year in the Second Circuit regarding use of links and whether or not we needed to collect them. So Nichols versus Noom, again, is in the Southern District of New York. Magistrate Judge Parker issued this decision. What I think is really interesting about, one of the things that's interesting about this decision is in the Second Circuit judges, especially Southern District, they are really pro, really expansion on relevance and discovery. I would have thought that this came from a more conservative district, but it came from the Southern District. So in this case, it didn't involve Microsoft 365, it involved Google and Google Vault. But Noom was using Google for Docs and was using Google for email. It was a highly negotiated ESI protocol. Everything was agreed to. One final thing that they couldn't agree to was how to pull email. Noom wanted to use what's built into Google, which is Google Vault. But the plaintiffs wanted to use an outside forensics tool because of the fact that they knew that tool, Google Vault, didn't have the ability to go and get linked documents and put them together. Initially on the ESI order, the judge, they took that one issue to the judge, and the judge ruled that the producing party is in a better position to decide how to do searches, relying on Sedona Principle 6, and said, no, we're going to let Noom decide, and they can use Vault. Several months after the production, the plaintiffs started noticing that a lot of the documents, the emails that were produced, had links in them. So they issued a motion for reconsideration, and the judge looked at this issue again. And this time, the judge focused on proportionality and the cost of the extra tool that plaintiffs wanted to get. But one of the interesting things she noted is that she didn't consider a link an attachment. She looked at attachments being when you're attaching a document, and to her, a link is not an attachment. She said most of the time that she gets documents, there's a lot of links in it and they're not relevant. I don't really think that was probably the right decision, because even doing more defense work, I do find that if you're talking about the relevance of a document and relevance that it was attached to an email, and the email's already, most of the time that link is important. She also focused on proportionality, saying that the cost of redoing the collection, going back and redoing it was way too much. And so she ruled against it. But one of the things she said was that it's, this is 2021. That was when it was issued, that surely there'll be better tools out there. And I think that's what you're getting with Microsoft. I think if this was if Noom had been using M365, I think it would have been a whole different opinion, because it is so easy to collect links from here, right? You don't need to go outside and it's already built in. So a lot of people are relying on the Noom case saying, oh, hyperlinks are not attachments. We don't have to worry about them. And what I'm here to tell you is if you're on this webinar today with us, you have M365, you have the ability to collect links, and so we can't rely on Noom. So I created some visuals. Visuals always seem to help me to kind of understand this, because like I said, I didn't understand it at first, what we're saying. So let's say that we have the custodian number one's mailbox is being searched, and the custodian number one has an email that they received from a non-custodian who's not in my search. And in that email, the non-custodian attached a non-searchable PDF and also did a link, and that's sitting in, linked a document that's sitting in the non-custodian's OneDrive. We are searching for the word car or bus, or because the email has bus in it, it's going to find this document. It's going to pull in the PDFs. It's going to go and find the non-custodian document in the non-custodian OneDrive and pull it into my collection. So if at the very beginning in my collection stage, I applied car or bus, and this document was sitting in one of my custodians, I'm going to get the link document. It's going to go in and find the link document in the non-custodian's drive and put it into my review set, and I'm going to get it. Great, I don't have any problems because one of the search terms was in the email, but that's not always the case. Second example, same thing, this email came from a non-custodian. This time, the email only contains the word bus. The word that I'm looking for, car, is in the non-searchable item, and it's in that link document. This document right here, this entire email, this email and the link document will not be in my results for two reasons. First of all, in the collection stage, I have not OCR'd my PDF yet, so I'm going to miss it. Second, in the collection stage, it's not pulling the links in yet. It's only when you commit it. So the fact that I had a search term that was sitting in a linked document in a non-custodian's document or in my PDF, I'm going to miss this document entirely. Third example, same thing, kind of similar to that. The results, this is not going to be in there because the word I'm searching was actually only in the link document, right? And the link document is not part of my collection yet. And this one, the fourth one I want to show you is a little bit more different, and it's interesting. So this one, this email was sent by custodian number 2. And this document is sitting in custodian number 2's drive. In this, if I am searching custodian number 1's email, I'm not going to get the document. I'm not going to get this email because the word car is in a non-searchable item, and the link document is not going to come with this email. So I won't get this email and this family. However, because custodian number 2, or this document is sitting in custodian number 2's document set and the word car is in there, you'll get this separately. So it's a little weird because in Noom, that's one of the things the judge talked about. Well, you don't have to get it where the email comes with the link document and you know how it's married up. You can do the searches of the OneDrive or the Google Drive separately. So that's similar here, but I don't think it's very helpful because the problem that you have is how do you know, first of all, you didn't get the email. You don't know that this custodian sent it. And even if you had gotten it, you wouldn't know how to link it up. So that's the nice thing with this tool. When you're doing a collection properly, the linked documents are going to be married up very easily. It's not a mystery what was sent. Otherwise, that's a lot of time trying to figure that out. Okay. And then John's going to talk about analytics and what you can do with analytics. And then after that, we'll go into the live demo. John?
Sure. Thanks, Tessa. So with the analytics, this is actually an additional indexing function that will go into your, as Tessa mentioned, when you commit a collection, when you say, I want to collect this data, It puts that data into a review set, and that's where the processing and the OCR and some of those other operations occur, similar to like what a Nuix does. There's an option to run analytics, which we're showing on the screen here. So step one is when you're in the review set, and I'll show this, you run document and email analytics. And that's really useful because the second box there that's highlighted in red, marked as representative, when you run analytics, it does several things. It does deduplication. So files are hashed. Emails are also deduplicated, but it's based on content. There's email threading that's run. So it'll thread the email messages and identify the most inclusive and those types of dynamics. And then there's near duplicate detection, which is very useful for your documents, your e-files, right? So all of those things are run. There's also themes, which is more of a conceptual clustering, which is Microsoft hasn't put a lot of, they haven't put a lot of effort into building that out. And some of you might be familiar with Equivio, which Microsoft had acquired 5 years ago. So some of this technology is actually based on the Equivio technology. But this can be very helpful in terms of winnowing down the amount of data that you send out and being able to use these features. But you've actually got to enable this. It's not done by default.
And what I would say about this analytics feature, I'll run it, the deduplication, even though I'm not deduplicating on export. I like it because I'm getting a little bit more accurate stats. Again, it's because I'm trying to determine how long is this review going to take, how much is it going to cost, and I can get some analytics out of there. So that's why that's a reason to do it. So again, these are 3 features in premium. We wanted to focus a little bit on it so you understand where they need to be run and why they make a difference on your searching, and that's why we did that first. Next, John is going to try to do a live demo on using premium. We're going to see if it works. If it doesn't, we've got slides for every step and we can get back to it. So give us 1 second when we try that.
Great. So let me know, Tessa, when you can see premium eDiscovery on the screen.
Well, I can see it, but I'm not positive everybody's seeing it big enough. Are they seeing... Andrea, can you tell me that? Are they still seeing the slides or are they seeing John's screen?
Make it a little bit bigger on my as well.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I see a question and it's talking about, is the deduplication only in premium? And I thought you didn't suggest we use deduplication in this app. You can see it, okay. So to that, deduplication on export is available in standard, but we do not recommend deduplication on export. This duplication is in premium. I run it just to get better stats and to get an idea of how many duplicates is in my collection. However, we do not suggest using deduplication on the final export. Like it'll ask you, do you want to deduplicate? We don't do it because I personally don't think the deduplication is accurate enough. The other thing is that most of our ESI orders and definitely the government, they don't want you to deduplicate it here because they want to be able to know which custodian had duplicates, and we can't do that if you do the deduplication there. So that's why we don't recommend you actually use it on export. Okay. All right, yep. John, it sounds like they can see your screen. Really little for me, but I think they can see it.
Okay, great. So I'm logged in as a eDiscovery administrator, so I can see all the different cases in my organization. As Tessa said earlier, if you caught it, Tessa said that a lot of times she's made an eDiscovery manager, which means that Tessa would only have cases that are explicitly assigned to her. So she wouldn't be able to see every single case that's in tenant. So I'm going to do a little bit of a Julia Child thing here where I'll start to create, bake a cake, if you will, and then I'll go to the cake that's already baked so we don't have to wait for things to happen. But the way that premium works is it's a case model. It's a case management. So you click create a case and you give it a name. And then what'll happen is it'll create this empty case, which doesn't have anything in it. But that's where you then have the ability to go in and change. And this is a great example, Tessa, of how Microsoft will change things on the fly. So I just clicked save normally what's happened for the past couple of years is it goes right to a landing page, but now Microsoft has changed it. So now it's asking me, do I want to add others to have access to this case? And then what it's also doing here, Tessa, is it's actually, which I like, it's asking me, do I want to enable OCR, which you talked about earlier.
You're right. It is amazing. Literally, you can be, I was in it yesterday. I told John, I just saw a different feature. Like, what is happening? Like, things can change fast. But what I like about this for clients is, as John said, you can create a case. I say, make a case, give me access to it, give my tech person access, and then add the custodians you want me to search. So you know exactly who I have access to, and there's breadcrumbs there. So that's great.
Yep, absolutely. And so this is a this is the first time I'm seeing this sequence. But anyway, enable the OCR. That's a best practice. If you're using Premium eDiscovery, we recommend you use the OCR. You have to enable it. And then we do see in the work that we do with clients that using the high accuracy is also recommended. So it's a little bit more taxing on Microsoft's side. It just requires more CPU cycles, but it doesn't cost you as the consumer of the technology anymore. So we do recommend that. And then it goes ahead, I'm going to complete that sequence. And now I've got my case. Now, as Tessa mentioned earlier, there's a number of features here, which we'll touch on. I'm not going to do a full demo of everything, but you do have the ability for organizations that maybe are using spreadsheets and emails to send out legal hold notifications. There is a built-in legal hold notification capability here that we can leverage, right? So the way that would work is we would go in here and we would say, okay, I've got 2 custodians that I want to preserve their data, and I also want to issue a legal hold notice. So I'll go ahead and I'll type in the first name of one of my custodians, and I'll type in the first name of the second. And it'll go ahead, it'll find those 2 individuals. So I see Megan, and I can see that under Megan, it says mailbox 1 of 1, OneDrive 1 of 1. Same thing for Joni. I'm going to hit next. I can see this box is checked that says hold. I'm going to click next and then submit. And so what we just did is a very significant thing. We added 2 custodians to the case, and we enabled the physical in-place preservation of the 2 custodians' mailbox and of their OneDrive. And if you remember to our earlier slides, when you preserve the mailbox, you're preserving email and private and group chats. So we're preserving very broadly here. We're also preserving their OneDrive, which means we're preserving the files that are shared for those custodians in private chat and the files that they shared, rather. And we're preserving things like whiteboard and meeting recordings. So what we just did with those few clicks is a pretty significant set of operations.
And what's nice, and I don't know, John, if you can show it, when you go into data source, it will show that the custodians who are part of the case, and then how many of those are on hold, and that's really important. And I was going to say, don't forget to put the people on hold. I've seen a couple of cases where I get in, I'm like, wait a minute, you've added custodians, but we need them on hold. You have M365. There really is no excuse, and it's hard to defend if you don't use the hold feature because it's so simple.
Yep, and we just saw with a few clicks, we did that very broad preservation of both Teams data, email, and files in OneDrive. So now what we're going to do, we'll go to communications. And now that I've added some custodians, if I click on new communication, call this initial hold, we can say that, let's say Patty's our chief legal officer. So the notification. So now what we're going to do is we physically preserve the data. Now we're going to tell the custodian that they're on hold. That's what this feature does. And we can essentially impersonate the chief legal officer or general counsel by putting their name in here, even though I'm logged in as Megan, the paralegal or attorney that's actually doing this work. And then I can say, you know what, this is an employment litigation, and it'll pull in a template. And then I can go in and the areas that are highlighted, I can fill in with the matter specific information.
Hey, John,
And
can
then
can a client add their own template or is that built in?
nope, they can add their own template. So
Okay,
that's completely customizable.
great.
And then there's the release, there's a reissue. So reminding the custodians that they're subject to hold, if you change the scope of the hold, and then there's reminders and escalations. So there's the functionality that if the custodian doesn't acknowledge within a certain time frame, it'll send out a reminder. And then optionally, you can have a second level of reminder, which is the reminder goes to both the custodian and his or her manager. So that's the legal hold notification. If we decide we only want to send it to one of the custodians, we can do that. If it's a situation where you might want to have a silent hold for somebody. And so that's the notification functionality. So really within a few clicks, right? We added custodians. You can see that it says hold, true, true. And if I click here and click edit, again, we preserved the mailbox and the OneDrive. And so we've done a lot in a fairly short span of time in terms of physically preserving data and notifying custodians. Now, another thing that happens is when you add custodians here, it kicks off a secondary indexing job. And so what Microsoft says is that the items that weren't indexed, it's going to go ahead and try to re-index them. Now, this is where some of what Tessa was talking about is really important. Microsoft will OCR at this stage, but they do not OCR email attachments. They only will take a crack at OCRing OneDrive and SharePoint files. So it's very important to keep that in the back of your mind when you're building out your workflows, because that comes into play with respect to unindexed items and using keywords at the collection stage. But I just want to point out that Microsoft does do this secondary indexing at this stage, even though I haven't conducted any searches. And that's fundamentally different than standard eDiscovery, where Microsoft just has their standard live index, and that's what you're searching against. Okay, so once we've done those two things, the next thing that we could do is, let's say that we want to do some of that searching that Tessa likes to do. You've got some keywords and you want to do some exploration to see how much data is there potentially. I want to kind of get a quick look at the data, like an early data assessment. So what I do is if I go to collections, it's a little bit of a misnomer because collections really should be called search and collect. That's really what they should call it, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click new collection, but all my intent is at this point is just to do some exploratory searches. So I'm going to do new search, next, and I'm going to tell it that I want to search against all my custodians. So this just tells the system search the two custodians that I added.
Hey, John, can you show them where at this point, if you're trying to add the custodians, you can see that they have a OneDrive, they have a Teams. Like I love that feature that you don't get in standard.
Yep. So this is this is where it's showing me that I'm searching the two custodians, and let me add. Yeah, for some reason it's not popping them in down here. Let me try it one more time.
If you look, when you get your slide deck, you'll see it. Yeah, oh, there it is. So this is great because like yesterday, I was trying to help respond to a subpoena and it was very specific. I'm not searching OneDrive. You can unclick it. But what I love is you can tell what people have. Otherwise, you're kind of shooting in the dark. So it's helpful.
Yep, absolutely. So, all right, we'll go ahead and click next. And then this screen is where we can do our exploratory searching. So earlier, Tessa had mentioned using a proximity search. So the key thing is that I think it's very fair what Tessa said, which is the keyword searching at this stage of premium eDiscovery is fairly limited. And even in the review set, which we're going to look at in a few minutes, it's still limited. It's not Nuix, it's not relativity. So you're not going to be doing 800 keywords here. You're probably not even going to be doing 100, right? But for exploratory searches where you've got a limited number of keywords, this can work really well. So I'm just going to do marketing. And then I'm going to use Tessa's example, the proximity. So I'll do marketing within 10 words of sales.
And so John, before you do that, this is where I want to explain. So as John mentioned, like if I'm early case assessment, I just want to figure out what am I hitting at, what kind of data, I want to run the searches, I want to look at the hits. It's fine to do the search at this point, right? Adding search terms, right? But if I'm doing it for the collection purposes, meaning collection and export purposes, you need to understand that if you put search terms in right here, you got the problem with the non-indexed non-OCR PDFs that are attached to email, and you don't have the links pulled in yet. But in some cases, I can analyze that. Like I said, I know that PDFs aren't important. We're not looking for this, and we've negotiated that. Or company, I've talked to custodians, they don't use links, and so it's okay to do the search terms here. In cases where I'm doing the collection, meaning export, and I'm applying search terms and I need all that criteria, instead, all I'll do is run a date filter, pull it all into a review set, and then do the searches in the review set. But sorry about that, John, go ahead.
No, that's perfect. And I think, that scenario would be, we just wouldn't put anything here, right?
Yeah.
And we would
but here, early assessment, you can do it right here. And plus, sometimes I just need to run each term separately to get the stats that I need to provide.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead. We'll leave that in there. I'm going to hit next, and then, oh, this is interesting. This is new. I don't know if you've seen this. I've not, this new set of checkboxes here is new. I'm not sure.
I saw that yesterday, okay, yeah.
It looks like it's giving you the option to, again, choose which data sources you want. So anyway, so I think I'm going to just choose all, right? Click submit. And so now what's going to happen is it's going to go ahead and it's going to run that marketing within 10 words of sales search against the custodian's mailboxes and their OneDrives. And so now what I'm going to do is this won't take that long to run, but I'm going to go to another case where I already ran the search so I can show you what you get. And this is where you'll be able to see what Tessa was talking about in terms of being able to see the stats and get a sense for what's there. And this is something, Tessa, you and I were talking about. Microsoft has recently made a lot of enhancements to this. So here's marketing near sales. I'm going to click on the results. And so this says preview. So that's a hint that this is what you're going to see are some new features or some new elements here that are newer that haven't been put into what Microsoft would refer to as general release.
This is for that pre-collection, right, John? So one thing is that number, don't be fooled, it doesn't have attachment count, so it looks smaller because we haven't processed yet.
Yep. So it's giving you some numbers here. It's telling us what our search parameters were, marketing within 10 of sales. And then let me go to collection, this one right here. Right, so it's giving us some numbers, and this is going to look a little bit similar to what you were showing before.
Mm-hmm.
And then condition report, and then top locations. But let me show you what happens when you actually commit, when you say, okay, I want to put this into a review set.
Yeah, and John, before you do that, I want to show, this is also a new feature. Where John was, where the collection, and then it tells you the review set name. Before I used to have to screenshot everything because it didn't have a connection between collection and review set. You didn't know what you named it, but now it tells you exactly what your review set is. You can click on that, and that's a nice feature. That's pretty new. But yeah, John, if you show them the...
Yep, let's go in here.
collection stats.
Right, so this is,
Oh, that's the other one. You have to go in the other one,
wait,
right?
this
The
is,
one-
yeah, we got to go to the one that's committed. Yep, here we go. Let me go to this one. So now, so Tessa, and this is what we were talking about, I think it was yesterday or earlier this week, right? There's a lot more statistical information about items with hits, whether or not you collected versions, if there's cloud attachments, if there's Teams conversations. And so this has all been added within, I would say, within the last week, maybe 2 weeks. All of this additional data about what you're doing with respect to your data set that you're adding to a collection, to a review
And
set.
the collection stats is even better because it does give you the attachment. Yeah, I like that. You can hover on it and it'll give you the numbers for attachments versus emails.
Yep. And then down here, another thing that was just added is the types of files that are in the collection. So this would be emails, this would be spreadsheets. And so there's a lot of intel here that wasn't there just a short couple weeks ago. Microsoft has added any errors in the collection. And then again, your collection parameters, any search conditions they used. So I kind of jumped the gun a little bit in talking about the review set. So let me go back to our previous. So I'm going to go back to the case that we just created. And so that search that we did should be done. So here it says estimated, right? So if we go back, these are the stats that we were looking at previously. Locations. But now what we want to do, and this is what Tessa was talking about earlier, is when you get to the point where you say, okay, I'm now ready to progress forward, I can put the data into a review set. And that's where Microsoft actually processes OCRs, the email attachments, and does those operations. And so I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to click on actions, and then commit collection. And then this is where we say, okay, I want to add it to a new review set. So we give the review set a name. I decide if I want to collect partially indexed items. I decide if I want to collect all versions. Remember, we talked about versions earlier, how it's enabled automatically. So if you want to get every version that's been created of a Word document, then we go ahead and we check that box, and that'll be part of what gets copied over into the review set. Then we click commit.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I don't usually do all those versions, but I do the partially indexed items. Even if I have OCR, those partially, I will collect those.
Right.
Okay.
And so now what happens is it says adding to review set, and this is the stage where Microsoft says, oh, you've got 2 custodians, and this is the parameter for what you want to put in the review set. It literally, Microsoft makes a copy of the data that's sitting in M365, puts it into a review set, which is part of the Microsoft cloud. As a user of the tool, you don't know, it's transparent to you as a user. But now if we go to jobs, we can see under the jobs tab, add items to review set. And if I click on this, you can see that there's a host of things that Microsoft does. Data transfer, which is that copy. Then there's ingestion, indexing, OCRing as part of this as well. And so all of that is done when you hit that commit the collection to the review set.
So generally, oh, sorry, John, I was going to say, so I generally, because I'm trying to negotiate terms, right? I don't want to provide a term to the opposing side or the government until I've run it. I will create separate searches. I'll run at the collection stage, I'll put the terms in because I'm getting a pretty good estimate. But once and then if the other side has terms I want to run, I'll run it in there. I'll run it separately, and then I'll review kind of a sample set to see, are these good terms, and I can negotiate with them. Once I'm finalized, if I'm going to run it in here, what I'll do is I'll do a collection without terms, and I'll commit it, right? Just with the date filter. And then I'll go into the review set and I'll do something very similar to what John has already done. But in the review set is where I'll run it, and I'll run searches, my export search, I'll save it, and then I'll have somebody export it for me. Because then the OCRing is occurring and the linked documents are in there.
And that's where we're at now. So this is a review set. So let's assume that Tessa has done that, right? Tessa did some exploratory searching. And then Tessa, you said you've got your custodians, you're going to use a date range. Now the data's in a review set. So what we do is we go navigate to the review set tab, and I'm going to go to this particular review set. And now what you've got is data that's been processed. Now I also ran, if you remember, we talked about earlier analytics. So I ran that deduplication, the email threading, and all of that. And so now that I'm in a review set, now what I've got is the ability to go through items on an item by item basis, but because the data has been processed, Microsoft has done a number of things for me. It's created parent-child relationships between items, like Teams conversations and the modern attachments. It's taken in the emails, and it's identified the child items within the email. It's done all of that work for me. And now what I can do is I can go to the filters, and we can use things like participant domain, sender domain. We can use item class, native file type, native file extension. And then one other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to do marked as representative, which is the duplicates. And then I'm going to do KQL. And so now I'm starting out with 26,000 items. And let's say you're just looking to focus on a specific domains, or you want to exclude certain domains, right? We can come in here and say, you know what? I'm not interested in anything from ESPN.com, Amazon.com. And so now that number is going to get reduced down based on the, so now I got rid of about 7,000 items. And so now I've got the ability to run keywords here, right? And there's multiple ways to do that. What I like to do, I know I talked to Tessa about this, and it's a little kludgy, but here I can run my same terms, right? But it's processed data.
Right, so a little bit more accurate.
Yep, and remember all those PDFs that were attached to emails, those have now been OCR'd. And so now, let's see what we go from 19,000 down to.
Hey, John, will you also show the audience how to highlight the terms? Like, that drives me nuts that it's not automatically.
Yeah. So we did a search for marketing within 10 words of sales. So I'm going to click on the first item here. And you have to click, when you do keyword searches, if you want to see where your hits are, you've got to click on the plain text view. So the source is the near native viewer. If we go to plain text, now I'll be able to see, okay, and these little dots on the right-hand side indicate where within the document my search terms are appearing. So I've got now the ability to go down through these. And so now clicking on this button here is just sequencing me through the documents here. Now, there are a couple different views, right? So if I've got emails mixed in with e-documents and attachments and so forth, right? So depending on how you're doing this, you may want to use the Teams conversation view or the family attachment view. But in any event, and here we can see I've got an email, right? And so I'm in the plain text view. This is the body of the email. If I click on the family, this looks like it's an attachment to that item, and it's telling me this is item number 5. So this is a child item. And if I click on that, it's going to give me the plain text view of the attachment. So that functionality allows you to go through and do some additional culling potentially, or like Tessa said, you may have a small data set, you may have a subpoena response or something where you're just going to do your entire 99% or 90% of the work here. You do have the ability to create tags right? So you can say yes, and you can do bulk tagging. So if you're doing keyword searches like we did here, we could say, you know what, everything that matches is going to be a hot doc, and I want to promote to to attorney review. And so it'll apply those tags to all of the items in one fell swoop.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
So, yeah, anything else, Tessa, that you want to make sure we highlight, or?
I think those are all good things. Like I said, you can try it a lot of different ways. I mean, you can do the searches individually at the collection stage, get your stats, or at least get a good idea, and then do one full collection and move it over and do a review, and that's helpful. Like I said, I go back and forth between standard, and sometimes standard is faster. I had to move a collection that was over 3 million. It took several days. As John has told me multiple times, when I'm in a panic, why isn't it working? Give it some time. Don't forget that if you had on-prem email, which was a single family house, you have now moved into a high-rise apartment and you're sharing your elevator, and John had mentioned they throttle. So sometimes your capability doesn't work as well. The searching is slower. I do a lot of my searching actually late, after 5, and I find that sometimes it's faster. So that does help. This is a great, it's not perfect. Neither of us are being paid by Microsoft, but it is a way to save clients money is the way I look at it. And it's a way to be quick, and I can look at data much quicker. If I had to take the 3 million emails out, just taking them out of Microsoft would have taken probably close to a week. Processing would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars in time. So you can do things much quicker. So anyway, we are close to the end of our day. I hope that you all have found this helpful. John and I are available anytime. You can reach us by email if you have any questions. As a reminder, this is approved for legal education hours, and you need to report your hours. Click on that CEU icon. I did see somebody say, I thought we were approved in Missouri, and Andrea will be sending that out. I think we are. There's a certificate of attendance and the recording that will be sent to everybody that attended. And then there is a short survey. If you would like to fill that out, that would be very helpful. Otherwise, that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful eDiscovery day. Thank you. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Tessa.